The great chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the nervous energy of 1,000 different species, each representing worlds that had known peace for over 3 centuries. Crystalline beings from the Zephyr Nebula clicked their mineral fingers against marble surfaces, while the gaseous ethereals swirled in their containment suits like living storms. At the center of it all sat the High Arbiter Kethvar, his forearms folded in what his species considered a gesture of deep contemplation. The holographic display before them showed a blue and green planet rotating slowly in the void of space. Earth. Such a small word for such an enormous problem. The motion has been seconded by 47 member worlds, announced Kethvar, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The human species will be removed from known galactic space effective immediately. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Vexthal of the Harmony Coalition rose from his crystalline seat, his translucent body refracting the chamber's light into dancing rainbows. High Arbiter, with respect, this is an unprecedented action. Never in our 1,000-year history have we voted to exile an entire species. Because never have we faced such a threat, came the reply from the back of the chamber. Commander Zoltar of the Hegemony Military Council stepped forward, his reptilian features twisted in what passed for disgust among his kind. In the 300 years since humanity joined our alliance, they have caused more diplomatic incidents, started more conflicts, and broken more sacred laws than all other species combined. The evidence was undeniable, and it floated before them in damning holographic detail. The Titan incident, where human explorers had awakened an ancient guardian that had slumbered for millennia. The Proxima conflict, where human traders had sold weapons to both sides of a civil war, prolonging suffering for profit. The Sacred Grove desecration, where human scientists had collected samples from a living temple world without permission, nearly causing a religious war. But it was the most recent event that had finally pushed the Council beyond their tolerance. The Omega Station Massacre. Ambassador Silthara of the Peaceful World spoke next, her melodious voice trembling with emotion. 200 innocent beings died when the human ship Defiance opened fire on a diplomatic vessel. Captain Sarachan claimed they were defending themselves, but the evidence shows no hostile action was taken against them. Human see threats where none exist, added Council member Quindell. Their paranoia makes them dangerous. Their aggression makes them unstable. And their refusal to follow established protocols makes them impossible to govern. Kethvar activated another display, showing star charts with red zones marking human activity. In 3 centuries, humanity has claimed 17 worlds, established 43 mining operations, and sent exploration fleets to over 200 systems. They expand faster than any species in our records. They consume resources at an alarming rate. And they refuse to accept limits. The truth was more complex than the Council wanted to admit. Humanity had indeed been involved in every incident mentioned, but they had also been the first responders to the Andorian plague, developing a cure in weeks that had saved billions of lives. They had been the ones to negotiate peace between the warring factions of the Spiral Arm Confederation. Human engineers had designed the technologies that now kept 50 different species' homeworlds habitable. But fear had a way of erasing gratitude. The human delegation requests the right to speak, announced the Chamber's AI system. Denied, Kethvar replied without hesitation. They have had 3 centuries to prove they could coexist peacefully. The evidence speaks for itself. The vote was swift and decisive. 847 species voted for exile. Only 12 voted against. Humanity's fate was sealed. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the human embassy ship, watching the Council chamber through reinforced transparasteel. She had been Earth's chief ambassador for 15 years, and she had seen this moment coming like a slow-moving storm. Her weathered hands gripped the railing as she watched species after species condemn her people to exile. "Ma'am," came a voice from behind her. Lieutenant Commander James Park, her military liaison, approached with a datapad in his hands. "The preliminary vote count is in." "It's not good." Elena didn't turn around. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we should start making preparations for evacuation." "All human colonies? All exploration fleets? All civilian populations?" James consulted his pad. "The motion calls for complete removal from known galactic space. That includes everything beyond the Sol system. We're looking at evacuating over 50 million people." Elena finally turned, her dark eyes meeting his. "They're going to give us ships, supplies, enough to establish new colonies somewhere else?" James shook his head. Basic transport vessels only. Enough to move people, but nothing more. No terraforming equipment, no industrial infrastructure, no military vessels beyond what's needed for protection during the journey. Protection from what? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. They're sending us beyond the galactic rim, ma'am. Into dark space. The void between galaxies. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. The space between galaxies was vast, empty, and hostile. No habitable worlds, no resources, no chance of establishing sustainable colonies. The Council wasn't just exiling humanity, they were sentencing them to slow extinction. How long do we have? She asked. 6 months to complete the evacuation. After that, any humans found in known space will be considered hostile invaders. Elena looked back at the Council chamber, where the final votes were being cast. They think they're solving a problem. Aren't they? James asked quietly. Elena was silent for a long moment. Jim, what do you know about human history? Enough to know we're survivors, ma'am. We're more than that. We're the species that survived ice ages by making tools from bones. We survived world wars by learning to split atoms. We survived our own worst impulses by reaching for the stars. She turned to face him fully. Do you know what happens when you corner an animal? James nodded slowly. It fights back. No, Elena said, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It evolves. The formal announcement came within hours. Humanity had 48 hours to begin evacuation procedures. All human colonies would be stripped of non-essential technology. All human vessels would be retrofitted for long-range travel. All human citizens would be relocated to designated transport ships for immediate departure from known space. The galaxy held its breath as news of the exile spread. Some species celebrated, believing that a dangerous element had finally been removed from their peaceful civilization. Others worried about the precedent being set. If humans could be exiled, what stopped the Council from targeting other species deemed problematic? But, in the depths of space, aboard the exploration vessel Prometheus, Captain Sarah Chan received the news with something approaching relief. So they finally did it, she said to her crew as they gathered in the ship's main conference room. They finally decided we're too dangerous to keep around. Chief Engineer Miguel Santos leaned back in his chair. What's our situation, Captain? We're currently 1,700 light-years beyond the rim, investigating those anomalous energy readings we detected last month. Officially, we're now criminals just for being here. Navigation Officer Lin Zhang pulled up a star chart on the main display. The nearest evacuation point is 6 months away at maximum warp. We could make it back in time for the deadline. Sarah looked around the room at her crew of 43 humans, all volunteers who had signed up for a 5-year exploration mission into unknown space. They were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers. They were the best humanity had to offer. Or, she asked. Lin's fingers danced over her console. Or we continue our mission. We're already beyond the rim. We've got supplies for 3 more years. And, we're onto something big out here. The anomalous energy readings had been growing stronger for weeks. Whatever was generating them was unlike anything in the Council's extensive databases. It was old, powerful, and completely unknown to galactic science. Show them what we found, Sarah ordered. The main display shifted to show a massive structure floating in the void between stars. It was clearly artificial, but its design followed no known architectural principles. Smooth curves flowed into sharp angles. Surfaces that appeared to be metal shifted and changed as they watched. And energy readings suggested it was still active after what could be millions of years. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah announced, I give you humanity's future. Dr. Amy Chen, the ship's xenoarchaeologist and Sarah's younger sister, stood to address the crew. We've run every scan possible from this distance. The structure is approximately 200 kilometers long and shows signs of advanced technology beyond anything in current galactic use. Power readings suggest it's fully operational. Any signs of life? Asked Security Chief David Kim. Unknown. But, we're detecting what appear to be manufacturing facilities, research labs, and what might be libraries or data storage centers. Sarah looked around the room again. The way I see it, we have 2 choices. We can go back and join the exile, spending the rest of our lives slowly dying in dark space. Or we can stay here, investigate this structure, and see what opportunities it might provide. The vote was unanimous. As the Prometheus moved closer to the ancient structure, its crew had no way of knowing they were approaching technology left behind by the predecessors, the first species to achieve galactic civilization over 15 million years ago. They had no way of knowing that this particular installation was designed as a repository of advanced scientific knowledge, waiting for a species worthy of inheriting it. And they had no way of knowing that their decision to stay would change the course of galactic history. Back in Council space, the evacuation proceeded with ruthless efficiency. Human colonies were stripped of their infrastructure and their populations loaded onto basic transport vessels. Families were separated, belongings abandoned, entire communities dissolved in a matter of weeks. The Exile fleet that finally departed known space consisted of over 3,000 vessels carrying 57 million human beings. They were sent toward the void between galaxies with minimal supplies, basic tools, and the desperate hope that they might find some way to survive in the darkness. But the Council had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that exile meant extinction. They had forgotten that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their military might. It was their refusal to give up. As the last human ship crossed the galactic rim and disappeared into dark space, Ambassador Vexthal turned to High Arbiter Kethvar with a troubled expression. "Do you think we've done the right thing?" he asked. Kethvar's forearms gestured in what his species considered ultimate certainty. "We have ensured the peace and stability of our civilization for generations to come. The human problem is solved." Neither of them noticed the small scout ship that had been monitoring their communications, or the message it transmitted to dark space, package delivered. "The galaxy thinks we're gone. Begin Phase 2. The Council had expected to eliminate humanity. Instead, they had given them the greatest gift possible: complete freedom from oversight, unlimited time to develop, and the ultimate motivation for revenge. In the vast emptiness between galaxies, 57 million exiled humans were about to discover that sometimes the best way to survive exile is to make sure your enemies regret sending you away. The Exile fleet drifted through the cosmic void like a constellation of desperation, 3,000 vessels carrying the remnants of human civilization into the darkness between galaxies. Admiral Victoria Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship New Horizon, watching the last traces of the Milky Way fade into distant starlight. Around her, 57 million souls faced an uncertain future in the most hostile environment the universe could offer. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had made her Earth's youngest fleet admiral before the exile. Commander Isabella Torres consulted her displays with practiced efficiency. "All vessels accounted for, Admiral. We've managed to maintain formation despite the gravitational stresses of deep void transit. Medical ships report acceptable casualties from the transition, mostly stress-related disorders and minor injuries from the rapid evacuation. Supplies? That's where it gets interesting," Torres replied, pulling up resource charts. "The Council gave us enough food and water for approximately 2 years, assuming normal consumption rates. Basic manufacturing equipment, minimal terraforming gear, and emergency medical supplies. They clearly expected us to die slowly." Admiral Kane nodded grimly. The Council's mathematics were simple and brutal. Humanity would survive long enough to reach the void, establish a few desperate colonies on whatever rocks they could find, and then slowly waste away as their resources dwindled and their equipment failed. A genteel extinction that would let the Council's member species sleep peacefully, knowing they hadn't directly murdered 50 million people. "What they didn't count on," Kane continued, "is that we've been preparing for this possibility for decades. The truth was that Earth's leadership had seen the writing on the wall long before the formal exile vote. Human intelligence networks throughout Council space had been reporting increasing hostility, growing diplomatic isolation, and secret meetings between major species representatives. The Omega Station incident had simply provided the excuse the Council needed to act on plans they'd been making for years. Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's chief science officer, stepped forward with a data pad in his weathered hands. "Admiral, we need to discuss the Prometheus situation." Kane's expression softened slightly. The exploration vessel had been 1,700 light-years beyond the rim when the exile order came through. Captain Sarah Chen had chosen to continue her mission rather than return for evacuation, taking her crew of 43 into the unknown rather than accept exile. "Any word from them?" "Nothing through standard communication channels. But, we've been monitoring some very interesting energy signatures from their last known position. Whatever they found out there, it's big. Kane activated the main display, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. The Exiled fleet appeared as a cluster of green dots slowly moving away from the galactic rim. Far beyond them, a single red dot marked the Prometheus's last known position. How long would it take us to reach them? With our current trajectory and the limitations of our civilian vessels, approximately 8 months. But, Admiral, we need to consider the political implications. The fleet is already questioning our leadership decisions. If we announce we're chasing after a single ship that refused to join the evacuation. Kane held up a hand to stop him. Marcus, what's the first rule of human exploration? Webb smiled grimly. Never leave anyone behind. Exactly. Send a coded message to all ship captains. We're not chasing the Prometheus. We're investigating energy signatures that might represent salvageable technology or habitable systems. The survival of our people depends on finding resources, and, right now, that's our best lead. What Kane didn't reveal was the second reason for pursuing the Prometheus. Hidden deep in the New Horizons secure databases was a file that only a handful of people knew existed. Project Lazarus, humanity's contingency plan for exactly this scenario. For 30 years, human scientists had been secretly developing technologies that could ensure their species' survival even in the most extreme circumstances. Advanced manufacturing systems that could build complex equipment from basic materials. Genetic modification techniques that could help humans adapt to hostile environments. And, most importantly, weapon systems that could defend against any threat the galaxy might pose. The Council thought they had exiled a primitive, violent species. They had no idea they had actually unleashed humanity's potential for the first time in centuries. Aboard the colony ship New Plymouth, Dr. Sarah Kim was discovering just how prepared humanity had been for this eventuality. The ship's manifest listed basic medical supplies and emergency equipment, but a closer inspection of the cargo holds revealed something much more interesting. This is impossible, she muttered, running her hands over containers that officially held spare parts for water recyclers. Inside, she had found components for advanced biomedical fabrication systems, genetic sequencing equipment that was decades ahead of anything the Council knew humans possessed, and sealed vials containing what appeared to be modified bacterial cultures. Her assistant, Dr. James Liu, looked up from another container. Dr. Kim, you need to see this. The container held what looked like standard emergency rations, but the packaging bore subtle markings that Sarah recognized from her classified research back on Earth. These weren't just food supplies, they were the foundation for Project Genesis, humanity's plan for rapid biological adaptation to hostile environments. How much of this is there? She asked. James consulted his tablet. If I'm reading these manifests correctly, every ship in the fleet is carrying similar hidden supplies. Officially, we're equipped for basic survival. Unofficially, we're carrying the most advanced biotechnology humanity has ever developed. Sarah sat heavily in a nearby chair as the implications hit her. They knew. Earth's leadership knew this was coming, and they'd been preparing for decades. The question is, preparing for what exactly? Before Sarah could answer, the ship's intercom crackled to life. All department heads to the main conference room. Priority Alpha briefing. The briefing room was packed with the ship's senior staff, their faces reflecting the uncertainty that plagued the entire fleet. Captain Lisa Wang, a former Earth Defense Force officer, stood at the front of the room with a data pad in her hands and an expression of barely contained excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to share information that's been classified for 30 years. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we decide how to proceed. She activated the main display, showing a complex schematic labeled Project Lazarus Full Spectrum Survival Initiative. 30 years ago, Earth's leadership began preparing for the possibility that we might face exile or even extermination by the Galactic Council. What you see before you is the result of 3 decades of secret research, hidden development, and careful planning. The schematic showed technologies that seemed almost magical. Manufacturing systems that could build complex electronics from basic elements found in asteroids. Biological modification techniques that could allow humans to survive in vacuum, metabolize exotic chemicals, or even hibernate for decades at a time. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets without leaving a trace. Dr. Kim raised her hand. Captain, how much of this technology is actually functional? All of it. Every ship in the fleet is carrying components for these systems, hidden in plain sight among our official supplies. The Council's inspectors were looking for military hardware and banned technologies. They never thought to check emergency medical supplies or basic manufacturing equipment. Another hand went up. What about testing? Development time? Some of these technologies seem impossible. Captain Wang smiled. Dr. Martinez, what do you think the real purpose of our deep space exploration program was for the past 30 years? We've been testing these systems on every human colony beyond Earth. The terraforming successes on New Geneva? Project Genesis biological adaptation. The industrial boom on Kepler Station? Advanced manufacturing systems. The defensive victories during the hegemony border conflicts? Weapons technologies the Council has never seen. The room erupted in excited conversation as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't been caught off guard by the exile, they had been preparing for it. Every human colony, every exploration mission, every seemingly innocent scientific expedition had been part of a vast preparation for survival in the most hostile circumstances the universe could provide. Captain Wang raised her voice over the discussion. Here's what we're going to do. Admiral Kane has already authorized the activation of Phase 1 protocols. We're going to find a suitable location in dark space, establish a primary colony, and begin implementing our survival technologies. But that's just the beginning. She activated another display, showing a timeline that stretched out over 50 years. Phase 2 involves developing new technologies specifically adapted for void survival. Phase 3 focuses on building industrial capacity that can support a growing population. And Phase 4. She paused dramatically. Phase 4 involves returning to known space. Dr. Kim felt her pulse quicken. Return? As what, refugees begging for readmission? No, Captain Wang replied, her voice carrying a cold certainty that sent chills down everyone's spines. As conquerors. The word hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. For 3 centuries, humanity had tried to fit into the Galactic Council's vision of peaceful coexistence. They had followed laws, respected boundaries, and attempted to be good galactic citizens. The reward for their efforts had been exile and a slow death sentence. The Council made a fundamental error, Wang continued. They assumed that exile would weaken us. Instead, they've given us something we've never had before: complete freedom to develop without oversight, unlimited resources to exploit without permission, and the ultimate motivation for advancement. She gestured to the timeline display. In 50 years, we'll have technologies that make the Council's most advanced civilizations look like primitives. We'll have populations adapted for any environment. We'll have weapons that can destroy star systems and defenses that can withstand anything they can throw at us. And then, someone asked. Wang's smile was predatory. Then, we go home and show them what a real human problem looks like. Meanwhile, 1800 light-years away, the exploration vessel Prometheus was about to make a discovery that would accelerate humanity's timeline beyond all expectations. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the alien structure's central chamber, surrounded by technology that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. The walls pulsed with energy patterns that seemed to respond to her presence, and holographic displays showed information in languages that predated known galactic civilization by millions of years. Amy, please tell me you're getting this, she said to her sister, who was frantically recording everything with every sensor the ship possessed. Dr. Amy Chen looked up from her equipment with eyes wide with amazement. Sarah, this isn't just a research facility. It's a repository. A library. The entire collected knowledge of the predecessor civilization is stored here. Knowledge about what? Amy consulted her readings. Everything. Physics, biology, engineering, mathematics, consciousness transfer, matter manipulation, dimensional theory. These beings achieve technologies that make our most advanced systems look like stone tools. Chief Engineer Miguel Santos emerged from what appeared to be a manufacturing bay, his clothes stained with exotic lubricants and his expression one of pure wonder. Captain, you need to see this. They've got fabrication systems that can build anything from basic atomic components. I'm talking about machines that can literally transform hydrogen into whatever element or compound you need. Sarah felt her heartbeat accelerate. If this technology could be understood, adapted, and implemented, it would change everything. The Exile fleet wouldn't need to slowly die in dark space, they could build a civilization that would make the Galactic Council tremble. How long would it take to learn enough to be useful? Amy shook her head. With our current knowledge base? Decades, maybe centuries. The gap between our science and theirs is almost incomprehensible. What if we had help? Before Amy could answer, the chamber's central display activated, showing a three-dimensional figure that appeared to be constructed from pure light. When it spoke, the words seemed to appear directly in their minds rather than through their ears. Greetings, inheritors. We have been waiting for a species worthy of our legacy. The figure gestured, and, suddenly, the chamber was filled with information, star charts, technology specifications, historical records, and warnings about dangers that lurked in the darkness between galaxies. You are not the first to be exiled from your home galaxy. We too were cast out by those who feared our potential. We too wandered the void, seeking survival in the darkness. But we learned that exile can be transformation, that isolation can be evolution, and that those who are cast out often return stronger than those who remain behind. Sarah found her voice. Who are you? What happened to your people? We are the echo of the predecessors, the final gift we left for those who would come after. Our people transcended physical existence long ago, but we left this repository for others who might face the same challenges we once did. You have been chosen not because of your technology or your power, but because of your potential. The display shifted, showing images of the human exile fleet slowly making its way through dark space. Your people face extinction, but they also face opportunity. We offer you a choice: accept our knowledge and use it to survive, or reject it and face the void alone. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the wonder and determination in their faces. The decision was obvious. We accept. The moment she spoke the words, the chamber erupted in light as information began downloading directly into the ship's computers. Terabytes of data flowed into human technology, automatically adapting and translating into formats they could understand. Technologies that had taken the predecessors millions of years to develop were being compressed into accessible knowledge that humanity could implement within decades. But, with the knowledge came a warning that chilled them to their cores. The void between galaxies is not empty. Ancient things dwell in the darkness, beings that predate even our civilization. They hunger for life, for energy, for the spark of consciousness that drives all living things. They will come for you, as they came for us. You must be ready. As the download completed, Sarah realized that humanity's exile had just become something far more dangerous and far more important than anyone could have imagined. They weren't just trying to survive, they were about to become the guardians of everything the galaxy had rejected them for protecting. Admiral Victoria Kane felt the universe shift beneath her feet as Captain Sarah Chen's transmission reached the exile fleet. The bridge of the New Horizon buzzed with activity as communication officers worked to decode and verify the impossible data stream coming from the Prometheus. Admiral, we're receiving technological specifications that our computers are having difficulty processing, reported Commander Torres, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. The complexity levels are beyond anything in our databases. Kane moved to the central display where streams of alien data cascaded across multiple screens. Show me what we're looking at, Isabella. Dr. Marcus Webb materialized beside them, having abandoned his usual composed demeanor for something approaching wonder. Admiral, if even half of what we're seeing is accurate, Captain Chen has discovered technology that could advance human civilization by thousands of years. We're looking at matter conversion systems, dimensional manipulation, consciousness transfer protocols, and energy generation methods that defy our current understanding of physics. And the source? Kane asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The predecessor civilization. The first species to achieve galactic dominance over 50 million years ago. They left behind a repository of their entire technological and cultural legacy, waiting for a species deemed worthy to inherit it. Kane stared at the data streams for a long moment, processing the implications. The Galactic Council had exiled humanity to die in the void, but instead they had stumbled upon the greatest treasure in the universe. It was almost poetic in its irony. Marcus, how long until we reach the Prometheus's position? At our current speed, 6 months. But, Admiral, there's something else. The data stream includes warnings about entities that exist in dark space. Things that prey on consciousness and feed on biological energy. The predecessors called them the Devourers. Kane felt a chill run down her spine. Threat level? Unknown, but given that they apparently contributed to the extinction of a civilization that possessed this level of technology, we should assume they're extremely dangerous. Before Kane could respond, alerts began sounding across the bridge. Tactical Officer Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim's voice cut through the noise with military precision. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of sensor range. Multiple contacts, approaching from galactic coordinates that should be empty space. Kane moved to the tactical display, watching as red dots appeared on the screen like malevolent stars. How many contacts? Initial count shows 47 entities, Admiral. They're unlike anything in our databases. Energy signatures suggest they're not technological constructs, but they're definitely artificial in some way. Dr. Webb consulted his datapad, cross-referencing the readings with the predecessor archives. Admiral, I think we're looking at our first encounter with the Devourers. Kane felt her training kick in, overriding the fear that threatened to cloud her judgment. She had commanded fleets through the hegemony border conflicts and the Titan system rebellion. She had never faced an enemy like this, but she had never commanded a fleet carrying 57 million people either. Red alert. All ships to defensive formations. Emergency broadcast to the fleet, we have incoming hostiles. The Exile fleet began moving with surprising coordination, 3,000 vessels arranging themselves into defensive clusters around the most vulnerable transport ships. Despite being predominantly civilian, many of the ship captains were former Earth Defense Force officers who had been quietly placed in leadership positions as part of Project Lazarus. Admiral, came Captain Wang's voice from the New Plymouth, our sensors are showing biological signatures from these entities. They're alive, but they're huge. The smallest one registers at nearly 2 kilometers in length. Kane activated fleet-wide communications. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. We are facing an unknown enemy that may pose an existential threat to our survival. I'm authorizing the activation of Project Lazarus defense protocols. All ships with hidden weapons systems, prepare for combat. Across the fleet, seemingly civilian vessels began transforming as hidden weapon systems deployed. The cargo ship Edinburgh revealed missile batteries concealed within its storage bays. The medical vessel Asclepius extended defensive shields that generated energy patterns far beyond standard Council technology. The mining platform News Series powered up particle beam weapons disguised as mining lasers. For 30 years, humanity had been building a secret military while the Council believed they were observing a peaceful species struggling with internal conflicts. Every human vessel contained technologies that had been tested in secret installations throughout human space, refined through decades of careful development, and hidden among equipment so mundane that even detailed inspections had missed their true purpose. Unknown entities, this is Admiral Victoria Kane of the Human Exile Fleet, she broadcast on all frequencies. You are approaching a peaceful convoy. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came not through their communication systems, but as a presence that invaded their minds like ice water in their veins. Images flooded their consciousness, vast hungry things that had dwelt in the darkness between galaxies for eons, feeding on the life force of entire species, growing stronger with each civilization they consumed. The message was clear, they had come to feed. Lieutenant Commander Kim's voice broke through the psychic intrusion. Admiral, they're accelerating. Time to contact, approximately 4 hours at current approach vectors. Kane forced herself to focus through the lingering effects of the mental contact. Fleet status? All defensive systems online. We've got approximately 140 ships equipped with combat capabilities, plus another 200 that can serve as support vessels. The rest are pure civilian transports. The odds were impossible, but Kane had learned long ago that impossible odds were just another way of saying that conventional thinking wouldn't work. Dr. Webb, anything in the predecessor data about fighting these things? Webb's fingers flew over his console as he searched through terabytes of alien knowledge. Admiral, according to the archives, the Devourers can't be destroyed through conventional means. They exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we don't fully understand. Physical weapons pass through them, energy weapons feed them, and they grow stronger by consuming biological neural energy. So how did the predecessors fight them? They didn't. They ran. Every time the Devourers appeared, predecessor fleets would evacuate entire systems and retreat to prepared defensive positions. Kane felt her jaw tighten. Running wasn't an option for a fleet of refugees with nowhere to run.
What about unconventional means? Webb paused, consulting deeper archives.
There are references to something called consciousness disruption technology. Weapons that target the psychic structures that hold their forms together.
But the specifications are complex. How complex?
We'd need to fundamentally alter our understanding of physics and develop entirely new technological paradigms. It would take years of research and development.
Kane smiled grimly. Good thing we've got 4 hours. She opened a channel to the Prometheus.
Captain Chen, I need everything you've got on consciousness disruption technology, and I need it now.
Sarah's response was immediate. Already working on it, Admiral. The predecessor AI is helping us adapt their technologies to our current systems.
We can transmit specifications for basic consciousness disruption fields, but implementing them will require some creative engineering.
Across the Exile fleet, the most brilliant human minds began working on an impossible problem.
Engineers who had spent decades hiding advanced technologies from Council oversight suddenly found themselves adapting 50-million-year-old alien science to equipment they had built in secret bunkers. Physicists who had been developing theories about dimensional manipulation discovered that their wildest hypotheses were conservative compared to predecessor reality. Dr. Sarah Kim aboard the New Plymouth found herself converting medical fabrication equipment into something that could generate consciousness disruption fields. This is insane, she muttered as she rerouted power systems and reconfigured quantum field generators. We're trying to build weapons that target the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Her assistant, Dr. Liu, looked up from where he was installing alien technology into their ship's defensive grid.
Dr. Kim, insane is relative.
A week ago, we thought we were going to die slowly in dark space.
Now we're fighting cosmic horrors with technology from a dead civilization. I'd call this an improvement.
Aboard the flagship, Kane watched as her fleet transformed itself into something the galaxy had never seen. Human vessels that had been disguised as civilian transports revealed weapon systems based on theories that wouldn't be discovered by Council science for centuries. Mining ships became mobile fortresses equipped with reality distortion fields.
Medical vessels deployed healing beams that could reconstruct matter at the molecular level.
Admiral, reported Commander Torres, we've got 63 ships now equipped with basic consciousness disruption fields. Another 112 have various defensive modifications based on predecessor technology. It's not much against entities this powerful, but it's better than conventional weapons. Kane nodded, watching the approaching red dots on her tactical display.
Sometimes better than nothing is all you need.
The first contact came exactly 4 hours later, as the leading devourer entered the outer perimeter of the human fleet. Up close, it was even more terrifying than the sensor readings had suggested. The entity appeared to be a massive jellyfish-like creature constructed from living darkness, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Tendrils of pure hunger extended from its body, reaching toward the nearest human ships like seeking fingers. All ships, engage at will, Kane commanded. The first volley of consciousness disruption fields struck the devourer like a physical blow, causing its form to writhe and contract as the psychic weapons interfered with whatever held its essence together. For a moment, Kane felt hope rising in her chest.
Then, the entity began to adapt.
Within minutes, the devourer had adjusted its form to resist the disruption fields, and its counterattack was immediate and devastating. Waves of psychic hunger washed over the human fleet, causing crew members to collapse as their life force was drained directly through their nervous systems. Admiral, we're losing people, reported the medical ship Asclepius. The psychic drain is affecting everyone within 2,000 kilometers of these things. Kane felt the hunger herself, a terrible emptiness that threatened to consume everything she was. But she also felt something else: anger. These creatures had come to feed on humanity's survivors, to finish what the Council had started. They had picked the wrong species. All ships, implement Project Lazarus Protocol 7.
Full biological adaptation mode, now.
Across the fleet, hidden systems activated as humanity revealed another secret they had been keeping for decades. Genetic modification technologies that had been disguised as medical equipment began altering human physiology in real time, adapting their nervous systems to resist psychic attack, enhancing their cognitive abilities to process impossible amounts of information, and preparing them for survival in environments that would kill unmodified humans within seconds. The Exile fleet was transforming itself into something the galaxy had never seen: post-human survivors equipped with technology that bridged the gap between current science and cosmic horror. But, even as they adapted, the devourers kept coming. 47 entities that had consumed civilizations for eons, now focused on the small fleet of human refugees who dared to resist their hunger. Kane looked around her bridge, seeing the determination in her crew's faces as they fought an impossible battle against cosmic predators. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting enemies that defied the laws of physics. They were also human, which meant they had no intention of giving up. "Dr. Webb," she called out over the chaos of battle, "how long until we reach the Prometheus?" 3 days, Admiral. If we can survive that long." Kane smiled, feeling the genetic modifications flowing through her bloodstream as her mind expanded to process new levels of reality. "Then, we better make sure these things regret finding us." The battle for humanity's survival in dark space had begun, and, with it, the transformation that would turn exiled refugees into something the galaxy had never imagined possible. The battle raged for 3 days and 3 nights in the depths of dark space, transforming both the human exile fleet and their understanding of what it meant to be human. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, her enhanced nervous system processing combat data at speeds that would have been impossible for an unmodified human brain. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that registered in ranges beyond normal human hearing, another adaptation that had emerged during the prolonged psychic warfare. Commander Torres, whose own modifications had given her the ability to interface directly with ship systems through bioelectric contact, responded without looking up from her console. "We've lost 17 ships, but they were evacuated before the devourers could fully drain them. Casualties are surprisingly light considering we're fighting entities that consume consciousness itself." The truth was that humanity's secret preparations had gone deeper than even Kane had known. The genetic modification technologies hidden in their medical supplies weren't just designed for environmental adaptation, they were specifically engineered to allow humans to evolve rapidly in response to existential threats. Dr. Webb approached the command station, his appearance noticeably changed by 72 hours of continuous modification. His eyes now showed flecks of silver that allowed him to perceive energy patterns invisible to normal human vision. "Admiral, we're not just fighting the devourers anymore. We're learning from them." Kane turned to study the tactical display, where the remaining 42 enemy entities circled the human fleet like predators testing their prey. But something had changed in the dynamic of the battle. The devourers, which had initially seemed unstoppable, were now moving more cautiously. "Explain." "Every time they attack us, our adaptation systems analyze their methods and develop countermeasures. But, more than that, we're beginning to understand their nature. They exist partially in normal space and partially in what the predecessor archives call consciousness space, a dimension where thought and reality interact directly." Webb activated a holographic display showing energy patterns that swirled through dimensions human science hadn't known existed a week earlier. "The remarkable thing is that our modified brains are starting to perceive these dimensions naturally. We're developing abilities that the predecessors took millennia to achieve." Kane felt a chill of excitement mixed with fear. "Are you saying we're becoming like them?" "Not exactly. The devourers are parasitic entities that consume consciousness. We're becoming something that can exist in consciousness space while maintaining our individual identity and biological forms. The predecessors called entities like this transcendent biologics, beings that bridge the gap between physical and psychic reality." Before Kane could respond, alerts began sounding across the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Kim's voice cut through the noise with urgent precision. "Admiral, we're getting massive energy readings from the direction of the Prometheus. Something big is happening out there." The main display shifted to show the space around the predecessor repository, where Captain Sarah Chen's ship had been stationed for the past week. What they saw defied immediate comprehension. The ancient alien structure was unfolding like a flower made of metal and energy, revealing technologies that had remained dormant for 50 million years. "Captain Chen, report," Kane transmitted. Sarah's response carried strange overtones that suggested her own modifications had progressed far beyond basic human enhancement. "Admiral, the predecessor AI has activated the repository's full capabilities. We're not just accessing their archives anymore, we're inheriting their entire technological infrastructure." The unfolding structure was enormous, easily 1,000 kilometers across when fully extended. Manufacturing bays capable of building starships from basic atomic components. Research laboratories that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. And, at its center, something that made Kane's enhanced senses recoil in awe. "Admiral," Sarah continued, "they've left us a gift. A complete defensive fleet, built using technologies that make our current capabilities look like primitive tools. The ships are designed specifically for fighting entities like the Devourers. Kane felt her heartbeat accelerate as she processed the implications.
How many ships?
200 combat vessels, 50 support ships, and a mobile command station that's basically a city in space. All of it designed for beings with our level of consciousness development.
The predecessors didn't just leave knowledge, they left an inheritance for whoever would prove worthy of their legacy. The tactical display updated as new contacts appeared around the predecessor repository.
Ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built, their organic curves hiding weapons systems based on principles that human science was only beginning to understand. Each vessel radiated power levels that exceeded the entire human fleet combined. But, even as hope surged through the bridge crew, Dr. Webb's expression remained troubled.
Admiral, there's something else.
The repository's activation has attracted attention. We're detecting new contacts approaching from deeper in dark space. Kane felt her enhanced senses reaching out, touching the edge of something vast and ancient and hungry.
More Devourers?
Worse. According to the predecessor archives, there are things in the deep dark that make the Devourers look like scavengers. Entities that have been sleeping in the void between galaxies for millions of years.
The repository's activation appears to have woken them up. The implications hit Kane like a physical blow.
Humanity had gained access to technologies beyond their wildest dreams, but they had also announced their presence to predators that could threaten entire galactic civilizations.
Time to reach the repository?
18 hours at maximum speed. Kane made her decision without hesitation.
All ships, emergency acceleration.
We're linking up with the Prometheus and claiming our inheritance.
Whatever's coming, we'll face it with every advantage we can get.
The next 18 hours transformed the human exile fleet in ways that none of them could have imagined. As they approached the repository, the predecessor AI began transmitting not just information, but actual consciousness enhancement protocols that accelerated human mental evolution at an exponential rate. Dr. Sarah Kim found herself understanding technologies that had seemed impossible just days before. Her hands moved across control surfaces that responded to thought rather than touch, manipulating matter at the quantum level to create defensive systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is incredible," she transmitted to her colleagues across the fleet.
"We're not just learning their technology, we're becoming capable of understanding it naturally. It's like we're evolving into the species we were always meant to be."
But, even as humanity transformed itself, the approaching threat grew larger. Deep space sensors detected entities so massive that they registered as gravitational anomalies, beings that had fed on entire galactic civilizations before retreating to the darkness to digest their prizes. Admiral Kane, now connected to the New Horizons systems in ways that made her more than human but still fundamentally herself, felt the presence of these approaching horrors like a weight on her enhanced consciousness.
Dr. Webb, tactical assessment.
Webb, whose own evolution had given him the ability to perceive probability structures across multiple dimensions, consulted displays that showed information in forms that would have been incomprehensible to unmodified humans. "Admiral, we're looking at 7 entities approaching from different vectors. Each one appears to be larger than most planets, and their energy signatures suggest they've been accumulating power for millions of years.
If the predecessor records are accurate, these things have consumed entire galactic sectors in the past."
Kane felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 57 million human lives depended on decisions she would make in the next few hours. But, more than that, she was beginning to understand that this encounter would determine whether any sapient life could exist in the void between galaxies.
What are our advantages? The predecessor fleet is specifically designed to fight these entities.
Our people are evolving into forms that can survive in consciousness space.
And we have something the ancient records say these creatures have never encountered before. What's that?
Webb smiled, an expression that now carried harmonics of meaning that spoke directly to enhanced human consciousness.
Human stubbornness.
These entities are used to civilizations that run or submit when faced with overwhelming power. They've never encountered a species that gets more determined the worse the odds become. Kane felt a laugh building in her chest, a sound that carried new frequencies as her vocal cords adapted to her enhanced nature.
Then, they're about to learn something new about the universe.
The link up with the Prometheus and the predecessor repository happened with surprising smoothness, as if the ancient technologies had been designed specifically for desperate refugees seeking salvation. Human consciousness integrated with alien systems, creating hybrid technologies that exceeded the capabilities of either species alone. Captain Sarah Chen met Admiral Kane in the repository's central chamber, and the reunion highlighted how much both women had changed during their time in dark space. Sarah's modifications had given her the ability to interface directly with predecessor technology, while Kane's enhancements allowed her to command hybrid human-alien systems with unprecedented efficiency. "Admiral," Sarah reported, "we've successfully integrated our people with the predecessor fleet. The ships respond to human consciousness like they were built for us. In a way, the predecessors designed them for whoever would inherit their legacy." Kane studied the tactical displays that now showed information in forms that human minds could process directly. "How do we stand against the incoming threats?" "Better than any previous civilization that's faced these entities. Our fleet now consists of over 250 ships equipped with consciousness disruption weapons, dimensional manipulation systems, and defensive technologies that can protect against psychic attack. More importantly, our people have evolved to the point where they can survive in environments that would destroy normal biological life." But, even as they spoke, the first of the ancient predators entered sensor range. The entity was so large that it warped space around itself, a living darkness that had consumed civilizations for eons. Its hunger was so vast that it could be felt across light years, a psychic pressure that threatened to crush any consciousness that came near it. "Admiral," came a transmission from the fleet, "we're receiving some kind of communication from the entity." Kane felt the presence touch her enhanced mind, and, suddenly, she was seeing images of civilizations that had faced this same choice throughout galactic history. The Zephyr Crystalline Empire, consumed after a brief but heroic resistance. The Ethereal Collective, drained of consciousness across 1,000 worlds. The Harmony Coalition's ancestors fled to the far reaches of known space to escape these very predators. But, within the images was something else, a recognition that humanity represented something new. These entities had consumed countless civilizations, but they had never encountered a species that could evolve in real time, that could adapt their consciousness itself to meet impossible challenges. The message was clear: surrender now, and the consumption would be swift. Resist, and face an eternity of being slowly drained across multiple dimensions of existence. Kane's response was equally clear, transmitted not just through communication systems but through the consciousness space itself, where her enhanced mind could speak directly to the ancient predator. "We are humanity. We were exiled from our galaxy for being too dangerous to coexist with peaceful civilizations. If you think that makes us easier prey, you're about to discover how wrong you can be." The entity's response was immediate, a wave of psychic hunger so powerful that it would have killed every human in the fleet just weeks before. Instead, it crashed against defensive systems that turned the attack into energy that powered their own weapons, while human consciousness proved capable of existing in the same space as cosmic predators. The final battle for humanity's transformation had begun, and the outcome would determine not just whether they survived, but what they would become in the darkness between galaxies. The war that raged across the void between galaxies lasted for 7 days that felt like 7 lifetimes. Admiral Kane, now functioning as a hybrid consciousness that existed simultaneously in normal space and dimensions that human language had no words to describe, commanded a fleet that bore only superficial resemblance to the refugee convoy that had been exiled from known space. The New Horizons bridge had transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to any member of the Galactic Council. Walls pulsed with living metal that responded to thought, displays showed information in forms that bypassed visual processing entirely, and the crew had evolved beyond normal biological limits while maintaining their essential humanity. "Status report," Kane requested, her consciousness touching each ship in the fleet simultaneously. Commander Torres, whose integration with ship systems had reached the point where she was more interface than operator, responded through direct thought transmission. "We've successfully repelled the first wave of ancient predators. 7 entities, each one large enough to consume solar systems, have been driven back through dimensional barriers we didn't know existed a week ago. The cost had been significant, but not in the way anyone might have expected. Rather than losing ships and personnel, humanity had lost pieces of its original nature, trading familiar limitations for capabilities that would have seemed like godhood to their previous selves." Dr. Webb, now functioning as the fleet's consciousness analyst, materialized beside Kane in a way that suggested he existed in multiple locations simultaneously. "Admiral, we need to discuss what we're becoming. The modifications aren't just enhancing us, they're fundamentally altering the nature of human consciousness." Kane felt the truth of his words in ways that transcended normal understanding. Each battle against the void predators had forced humanity to evolve, to develop new capabilities that allowed them to survive encounters with entities that fed on the concept of existence itself. They were still human, but they were also becoming something that had never existed in the galaxy before.
Show me the analysis. Webb activated displays that showed the transformation in terms that enhanced human consciousness could process.
We're developing what the predecessors called existential sovereignty, the ability to maintain individual identity even when existing in consciousness space. It's allowed us to survive attacks that have destroyed civilizations, but it's also making us into something that doesn't fit normal galactic categories.
The implications were staggering.
Humanity hadn't just survived exile, they had evolved into a form that could exist in the most hostile environment the universe could provide. They had become native to the void between galaxies, creatures of the dark space that even cosmic predators had learned to fear. Admiral, came a transmission from Captain Sarachan aboard the Prometheus. We're receiving communications from the Galactic Rim.
It appears our battles haven't gone unnoticed.
Kane shifted her attention to the incoming signals, her enhanced consciousness parsing information from sources 50,000 light-years away. What she found made her feel emotions that her enhanced nature could barely contain.
The Galactic Council was in chaos.
Energy signatures from the battles against the Void Predators had been detected throughout known space, causing panic among civilizations that had forgotten such entities existed.
Ancient defensive protocols were being activated on worlds that hadn't faced external threats for millennia.
And, in the depths of space, monitoring stations were detecting something that made every species' leadership tremble. Humanity was not only alive in dark space, they were winning.
Dr. Webb, how much of our transformation is visible to normal galactic sensors? Webb consulted displays that showed probability cascades across multiple dimensional frameworks. Everything, Admiral.
Our energy signatures, our consciousness patterns, our technological integration with predecessor systems, all of it is being detected and analyzed by every major civilization in the galaxy.
They know we've become something that exceeds their understanding.
Kane felt a smile that existed in dimensions beyond normal expression.
And what conclusions are they reaching?
Fear, primarily. The same species that exiled us for being too dangerous are now realizing we've become something infinitely more powerful than they imagined possible. But there's something else: requests for communication.
The irony was perfect in its completeness. The Galactic Council had exiled humanity to prevent them from becoming a threat to galactic peace and stability.
Instead, they had created the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known, and now they wanted to negotiate.
Put me through to the council chambers. The connection took several minutes to establish, bridging the gap between enhanced human consciousness and normal galactic communication systems.
When High Arbiter Kethvar's image finally appeared on the display, his forearms were trembling in what his species considered extreme distress. Admiral Kane, he began, his voice carrying harmonics of barely controlled panic, the Council requests immediate diplomatic contact with human representatives. Kane let her enhanced consciousness touch the edge of the communication system, allowing her presence to be felt across the light years separating them. She felt Kethvar recoil as his mind encountered something that his species had no framework for understanding. High Arbiter, she replied, her voice carrying frequencies that spoke directly to consciousness itself, I'm curious about the timing of this request. 50 years ago, you deemed humanity too dangerous to exist in known space.
What's changed? Kethvar's composure cracked entirely.
Admiral, please understand, the exile was a mistake. The Council acted out of fear and misunderstanding. We wish to formally apologize and discuss the terms for humanity's return to known space. Kane felt laughter building in her chest, a sound that would have registered as music in dimensions that normal beings couldn't perceive.
Return? High Arbiter, why would we want to return?
The question hung in the void between them like a challenge to reality itself. In the background of the transmission, Kane could sense other council members, their consciousness patterns radiating terror as they contemplated the implications of her words.
Admiral, surely humanity wishes to resume its place in galactic civilization?
Kane activated displays that showed the transformation of the exile fleet, 250 vessels that had evolved beyond any technology the galaxy possessed, crewed by beings who could exist in environments that would destroy normal life, powered by consciousness itself. High Arbiter, you exiled 57 million humans to die in dark space.
We didn't die. We evolved.
We became something that can survive in the void between galaxies, something that can fight entities that have consumed entire civilizations.
Why would we want to limit ourselves to the narrow boundaries of normal space? Before Kethvar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the council chambers.
Kane felt the disturbance through the communication link. Something was approaching known space from the galactic rim, something that registered on sensors as impossible.
"Admiral," Kethvar said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what is that?"
Kane consulted her own displays, seeing the approach of something that made her enhanced consciousness marvel at the audacity of her own species. The Exile fleet was returning to known space, but not as refugees seeking readmission. They were coming as conquerors. That, High Arbiter, is the other half of our fleet.
While we've been fighting cosmic predators in dark space, they've been building. They've been growing. They've been preparing for this moment.
The approaching force was enormous, over 1,000 ships built using hybrid human predecessor technology, crewed by beings who had spent 50 years adapting to existence in the most hostile environment the universe could provide. They weren't the desperate refugees who had been exiled decades earlier. They were something new, something that transcended the categories that galactic civilization used to understand reality.
"What do you want from us?" Kethvar asked, his species equivalent of tears streaming down his face. Kane considered the question, feeling the weight of 57 million transformed human consciousness touching hers across the void. What did they want from the galaxy that had cast them out?
"Nothing," she replied, and felt the shock ripple through every consciousness listening to the transmission.
"We don't want anything from you.
We've evolved beyond the need for your planets, your resources, your approval.
We can survive in environments you can't even imagine.
We can build technologies you can't comprehend.
We can fight enemies you've forgotten existed."
She paused, letting the implications settle.
"But there's something you need to understand. You created us.
Every capability we've developed, every adaptation we've achieved, every evolution we've undergone, all of it happened because you forced us to survive in the most impossible circumstances imaginable."
Kethvar's voice was barely audible. "What does that mean for the galaxy?"
Kane smiled, an expression that now existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. "It means you're about to discover what happens when you take the most adaptable, most stubborn, most dangerous species in the galaxy and give them unlimited time and motivation to evolve." The communication link carried images now, the Exile fleet approaching the galactic rim, their consciousness patterns visible to every sensor in known space. But, more than that, it carried the presence of 57 million beings who had transcended normal biological limitations while maintaining their essential humanity. "High Arbiter, you wanted to know what humanity would do with unlimited power and no oversight.
You're about to find out."
As the Exile fleet crossed the boundary into known space for the first time in 50 years, every civilization in the galaxy felt the presence of something that had never existed before. Humanity had returned, but not as the species that had been exiled. They had become something that could exist in the void between galaxies, something that could fight cosmic predators, something that transcended the normal limitations of biological existence. The Galactic Council had tried to solve the human problem by removing humans from the equation. Instead, they had created the ultimate human solution, a species that could survive anything the universe could throw at them, equipped with technologies that made galactic civilization look primitive, and motivated by 50 years of forced evolution in the most hostile environment possible. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had always known, that the most dangerous thing you can do to humans is try to destroy them.
Because they don't just survive. They come back stronger. And they never forget who tried to eliminate them.
Kane looked around her bridge at the enhanced humans who had become her crew, feeling the presence of millions more spread across a fleet that could challenge the fundamental order of galactic civilization. "Set course for Council space," she commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated across dimensions.
"It's time to go home."
The exile was over. The reckoning had begun.